Hi, my name is Becky Jennings, and this is the ResponseABLE Parenting Podcast. I give you the transformational tools to stop reacting to your children in the moment and start responding with intention. Hello, everyone. This is Becky Jennings. I am the creator of ResponseABLE Parenting, and today I'm doing something totally weird. I am hosting a podcast and doing it live at the same time, because I had something that I just had to share. And it was about my parent-teacher conference that I went to for Hunter yesterday. So I want to share with you just the progression that has happened, where I was at our first parent-teacher conference, what I did in response, and then how things have so dramatically changed that I'm kind of still buzzing and feel like I'm on cloud nine, because sometimes you just don't believe that like your efforts are making a difference. And sometimes you can get so stuck in the mundane and you can get so frustrated and you can feel like you're failing endlessly as a parent. You're not nailing the script. You're not doing it how you should. And it just gives you this sense of like, when will I ever get out of this? When will I stop receiving the phone calls that there's been an issue and I start hearing other things? So we went to our first parent teacher conference when he was in preschool. He was like just shy of 3. And I was really excited because I was like, this is the cutest thing. We're going to a parent teacher conference. It was our first baby and he's in school, and like all the warm and fuzzy feels and all the things. And they sat us down and they let us know that while he was creative and he was charismatic and he was, his friends liked him, he had impulse control issues. And I quote, if he doesn't learn how to control his impulse issues now, then all of the good stuff will be overshadowed and he will end up in the principal's office for the majority of his elementary, junior high, middle school, all of that, high school and on, that all of his good graces would be overshadowed. And I remember leaving that parent-teacher conference so defeated. Just, how did I miss the marks that he was this kid? How did I not see, and where have I failed him? And I left in tears and I was just broken down. I had a brand new baby and it was in the middle of, just started COVID, right? So everybody was on hyper alert and I just felt like I had failed. And so instead of going down a path to be creative and explore what was going on, to get curious about what was happening in his world, we doubled down on punishments. He wasn't allowed to touch things, that might break. So that immediately would be taken away from him. And he wasn't allowed to get too close to the baby because we were afraid of these impulse control issues and that he would hurt the baby. So, things started systematically getting more and more rigid for my child. And I remember my husband and I would constantly say, thank God he's so resilient because we're being really hard on him. But then it would be reinforced by the school that those hard tactics were actually important to do. So he had a brand new kid at home, a brand new brother. He couldn't be his, loud 2-3-year-old self that he used to be. He was getting shushed all the time. He wasn't allowed to, play rough. Everything was just like, you're not allowed, you're not allowed, you're not allowed. Okay, let's move to pre-K. This is when he's 3, 4-ish. And the teachers continued same school. So they reiterated the same narrative of the troublemaker, right? If he's this troublemaker, then he's going to really struggle. He's going to really, really struggle with, with following the order in class. He's going to really be challenged with learning because he's so busy, causing troubles. And all of the good stuff, his creativity, how he does well in class, all of that will be overshadowed because of his impulse control issues. He's like a sensory seeker. So they encouraged us to go to occupational therapy to get him evaluated and assessed. And at each assessment, they were just telling us, this is a developmentally appropriate thing. He is a sensory seeker. We can help him with processing stuff, but he's not autistic. He's not on the spectrum. He doesn't struggle with ADHD, which are some of the things that the teachers were telling us. Even though we went through the steps, we were being encouraged on a regular basis to inform harsher and harsher punishments. So I read books on harsher punishments for children. And we started really, that's, I think, really when the yelling started to happen, is right around 3 or 4. So if he didn't get something right the very first time, he would go on a break. So it was a timeout disguised with better language, kinder language, but he would go on a break. He would go on a 1-minute break. Okay, so it wasn't fully isolated, but he would have to sit down and stop what he was doing for 1 minute. And then the breaks would increase based off the severity of what he did. So some breaks would be 5 minutes. And it got to the point where we were giving like 30 breaks a day. And he would even say, how long would this one be? How long should I tell Alexa to set the timer for? And you could tell, obviously, that was no longer making an impact. For a split second, we thought, oh, these breaks are really helping him with impulse control. Meanwhile, the meltdowns were getting so intense that I truly started to believe that maybe my child does have developmental issues. Maybe he does have something that we should be looking into. Maybe he should be evaluated by a psychologist, because he was basically, we weren't hearing him in any capacity, that he had to get so loud for us to actually hear him, and we weren't doing it. He wasn't allowed to make mistakes. He wasn't allowed to be a kid. And meanwhile, his, 1-year-old brother now at the time, so cute, and little babies can't do any wrong. And so he's watching us, fawn all over, basically, his younger brother, and he's getting endless punishments. Then we move to kindergarten, in which we've been told that he is going to struggle greatly in kindergarten, even though the individual educational assessment that we had for him proved that he was on track. He was fine in terms of, what you need an IEP for, fine. But he was still struggling really hard in social situations, struggling with impulse control, struggling with bad behavior. He was struggling with integrating a lesson of, you shouldn't do this. Like, if you do this, this is the consequence. He was just struggling to really integrate those lessons. And with that, his teacher said, you need harsher punishments. You need to take things away from him. If he does something wrong at school, you need to take away the thing he cares about the most. Because the only way to motivate a child in her 20 years of teaching history is to take away something that they care about the most. That was the advice that we got. And at the time, I was just beginning this parenting research part of my life. And part of me was like, I don't think that that's going to be how this works. But at the same time, I didn't have the tools. I didn't have the education on what was developmentally appropriate. And if these impulse issues were wrong, or maybe just a developmental stage. So many parts of this process, I was led to believe that my child was acting inappropriately, and specifically he had issues. And what I've come to find is that a lot of the advice that I was giving is because conformity in a classroom is really important, which I get. I get that one teacher is in charge of 20 plus students at times. And also, if a child is going off script, being more creative, it is much easier to move that child back in line than it is to lean into the creativity and foster that. I get that now. And that's something that we've had to work on at home, where maybe what he isn't getting at school, we can give to him in a different way. But I want to highlight something very specific. Each and every year, age 2 to 3, 3 to 4, 4 to 5, whenever we got negative feedback or we got an insight into the teacher's perspective of how he was behaving, we doubled, tripled, quadrupled down on punishments, yelling, bribing, threatening. We would fall back on authoritarian tactics. We would power over him and force a behavioral change. We never got curious about why he was acting the way he did. We would just basically tell him it was wrong. You shouldn't do that. Don't do that again. If you do that again, this is what's going to happen. We had reward charts. If he performed, this is literally, if he performed the way everybody expected him to perform, he could earn something. If they didn't perform in the way that they needed to perform, then we basically had this chart, like, if you do good things, it goes up, and if you do bad things, it comes down. And it was this little clip that we did, and we thought it was brilliant that he could see if you did good things, it moved up, and then he would get like a piece of candy or something like that. Again, rewards only last for so long. Bribes only encourage behavior for so long. What I didn't understand is I was cultivating within him this stress, this overwhelm of constantly having to perform to an unrealistic expectation that we had, that his teachers had, that weren't developmentally appropriate. And if he didn't conform to the exact precise expectations, he would be punished. He would be yelled at. He would be isolated. Sometimes if he was lashing out, he'd be restrained. And all of this was in response to parts of me that were embarrassed, that like, if this is how he's presenting at school, what does it say about me as a mom? Clearly I'm failing. Clearly I'm not doing a good enough job. So I need to double down and make sure that I prove that I am a good mom, that I am doing it right. And I'm going to do that by putting more punishments in place. I'm going to yell more, and I am going to make sure my child understands the exact way that they are supposed to show up. And when they don't, they will receive more punishments. It was this vicious cycle. And I was literally going to bed every single night with so much guilt and so much sadness and confusion because I didn't know what to do. I felt helpless. I felt hopeless so many times. And I would parent from this place of despair of, I don't know the script. I don't know what tool to use. And I was constantly throwing, spaghetti against the wall, hoping that this would be the thing that magically transformed his behavior. And all of a sudden I'm getting great reports. I'm getting wonderful feedback because I've done my job as a good, sturdy parent who has taught my child a lesson. He has experienced consequences. He understands that if you do this, you will receive this kind of punishment. And this happened for years. Arrow 2, starting to tap into books, How to Talk So Your Children Listen, The Whole Brain Child. I started getting a sense of like attachment play and these kind of things. I was like, interesting, very different from the book that I was reading about punishments and authoritarian tactics and your child's broken brain and all sorts of stuff that I had been encouraged to read. And when I would go back to the teachers and let them know that these were the things we're doing, I got a lot of positive feedback and validation that clearly I needed, that I was doing the right thing and that my child would benefit from this type of parenting. But at home, situations were worse. Meltdowns were worse. Fighting between me and my husband and my son was worse. It just seemed like there was no digging out of this hole. So when I started kind of tapping into another way of thinking, I started learning about attachment science, and I started learning about brain development. And then when I went back to school and became certified as a parent coach, I started to, it was kind of like the veil was lifted, and I was able to see so much more clearly how my expectations of his performance were grossly unattainable. And when I started to see that a lot of how I needed him to show up was to receive validation of my parenting, to feel like I was doing good as a parent, to prove maybe my worthiness as a person. And so for the past year and a half, I have been changing the way that I do things at home. We've taken out reward-based systems. We've taken out punishments, really. We don't take things away when you do something wrong. If he breaks a toy, then the natural consequence is he broke the toy. If he's mean to a friend at the playground, the natural consequence is the kid doesn't want to hang out with him anymore. But if he's mean to a kid at the playground, we don't take away TV time. The two aren't matched. So we've really started to work from a place of value-based consequences and value-based boundaries. We've started to really spend more time getting curious about what's going on for him in the moment, about why he might be reacting the way he's reacting. Is his nervous system reacting to a trigger? Is he reacting from a place of distrust because we used to respond in a certain way? There are so many ways we have changed how we're parenting. The yelling has gone, we used to yell all day. It felt like we were yelling all day. And now if we yell once or twice a week, we kind of even shock ourselves. We used to punish all the time. And now we sit down and we actually have a discussion about it where I get curious about why, and we're able to explore a solution together. With sibling fighting, I now hear both sides. I listen to both sides and we problem solve together. I lead so much with curiosity and understanding and empathy that his meltdowns have gone from 45 minutes to an hour and a half range to 3 or 4 minutes, because he knows that I see him and that I am understanding him, and I'm not casting judgment on whether or not that reaction is valid, that I'm willing to listen to it as opposed to telling him that's not acceptable. I will not let you do that. I won't let you act like that. These are things I used to tell him. And now I compassionately, as he's going through a meltdown, I witness it and I see him. And I say, this must be so hard for you. And I understand that's true. And I'm here and you're safe. And we'll get through it. But right now it hurts. And right now you're really frustrated. And I'm here to listen. He never heard that from me from 3, 4, and 5 years old. As we know, it takes a village to raise our children. But more and more, we are doing the entire job on our own. And that stops today. I have created a parent community app focused directly on giving you essential support tools. The ResponseABLE Parenting Community Group is available now. In this community, you will have more parenting strategies right at your fingertips. You will have direct access to me and my coaching every month in our live Q&As, where you can bring your burning parenting questions and get my real-time support. I will host monthly exclusive workshops, facilitate weekly skill-building exercises, and more. This space is designed to meet you where you are at on your parenting journey. It's a judgment-free zone with parents and caregivers who are learning and growing right alongside of you. For less than $1 a day, you will have access to exclusive parenting content and coaching. I cannot wait to be a bigger part of your parenting journey. Head over to ResponseABLEParenting.com to join today. Enter promo code PODCAST to receive $10 off your first month. That's PODCAST for $10 off your first month. Arrow to yesterday, my first grade parent-teacher conference. I'm so nervous because I've never really gotten good feedback It's always been things that need to be worked on, that these are areas of deep concern and future projection into how he's going to be this person in social situations. And it was all positive. I'm sitting there going, do you have the right file of the right kid? Are we talking about the same kid? She's talking about how he takes responsibility for his behaviors in class, that if she has to do anything, which is very rare, he says he understands and he's willing to change and find a solution. He doesn't have outbursts in class, that he's willing to work with people and he listens to other people's needs, that he's really creative and he loves sharing with friends and he loves being with friends and he cracks people up and he's smart. And I'm hearing this teacher say this stuff and I'm kind of emotional about it because what? Wow. And she said to me, whatever you're doing at home, keep doing, because he's so happy. And you can tell that he just soaks in the moments that he has with you guys. And he really values you guys, and he really values your discussions, and he values how you talk to him. And she said, we can tell, the teachers can tell that he has a good home. And it made me so happy. Because I knew that I had changed the way I was approaching. He's still doing some similar things. She said he still has to work on impulse control, but she sees that maturity coming out. And that the social immaturity that's happening on the yard, it's elementary school and it's to be expected. And the things that we were expecting of him at 3 years old, 4 years old, 5 years old, his brain wasn't there. He wasn't there, and we were trying to force it so hard for him to learn the lesson, as opposed to meeting him where he was at, accepting that that was very true for him, and then building skills and supporting him to a deeper understanding versus forcing him and being this authoritarian, jamming this lesson down his throat, but it was wrapped in shame and embarrassment, and he wasn't good enough in meeting our expectations. But for 1.5 years, we've shifted that, almost 180-degree shift. And when we mess up, because we do, we go back and we apologize and we own our part in it, and we let him know how we are going to keep practicing and integrating and learning the lessons and doing things different and showing up for him in a better way. And to see that reflected in the way that his teacher spoke about him, and to see that reflected in how he shows up in class, about how he's letting his authentic personality shine without fear of repercussion, that he's learning the social dynamics, but he's learning them through natural consequences on the schoolyard if a friend is upset. And he's learning what parts of him are able to shine and shouldn't be suppressed just because they might not conform to what everybody else expects. That the coolness, the cool parts about him that are so unique, and people point out, that's so unique. I don't see a kid doing that. But in preschool, we were told he shouldn't do that. I remember a very specific lesson that they were supposed to build like a train track in preschool. And the goal was to build the train track from one side to the other. But what the parent-teacher conference told us at that conference, they said he built the train track, but then he built a like little village, and he was pulling his friends over to like show the village, and he was pulling them, and he shouldn't be doing that. And he was just trying to get their attention to this village. And he was talking about, the house, and he was talking about the mailman in the village. And he was talking about, how the train went through the village and had to move around the village to, all this stuff. So he had done the assignment, but then created extra stuff around it, creating this whole world. And he was inviting his friends to be a part of that world. And we were told that he wasn't conforming to the lesson. And now I'm so triggered by that when somebody sees him doing something and they point it out as creative. I'm like, wait, you're right. That is creative. That's part of him that I've been trying to no, just do it the way you're supposed to do it. As opposed to encouraging, well, what other ways are there to do it? How can you creatively problem solve this? What would feel good for you? You can come up with the same answer, but you could do it in a different way. And I've been stifling that problem or that creative exploration in him because so many teachers told me that he needed to conform in order for him to succeed. And when we've flipped the script and we've shown up differently as parents, all of that is able to come out in a way that is still socially safe, in a way that meets the needs of the teacher, meets the needs of his friends. He's able to be creative and expressive. And it's just been magical to see. In his after-school program 3 days ago, the teacher pulled me aside and said, I don't know what you're doing, but keep doing it. This is a totally different kid than last year. Something's alive in him that we haven't seen, and it's so cool to see. And you know what's different? The way I show up. He's being the same kid, and I'm showing up for him in a way that's safer. I'm using tools to help support me to regulate my nervous system when I get triggered. I'm showing up for him in a way that's curious, that's supportive, that as opposed to using shame to teach the lesson, I'm understanding that the skill set isn't there yet. So how can I help him grow the skills? How can I support him to learn the lesson in a way that doesn't dysregulate his body, but I can do it through play, through connection, through safety? And it's amazing to me because I'm sitting over here going, holy shit, I just had the first parent-teacher conference that was positive. And the only thing that's different is the way I showed up as a parent. Isn't that crazy? That when I did the work, it's hard work. It's actually work to show up and pinpoint things within you that you need to address, that you need to heal, that you need to pay attention to, that you need to be aware as a trigger so that you can build skills around it, so that you're not constantly operating from a place of reactivity. And when we can do that, we show up differently. We're safer in our own bodies. And when we cultivate that safety within our own bodies, our kids feel that safety and they can breathe a little bit. They can explore human mistakes. And as opposed to feeling like that's determining their level of worthiness and connection, they know they'll be supported to learn the skill around it. And I didn't give my kid that gift for so many developmental years. And now he has that and he's thriving. And it's just magical to see that the only thing that changed from all these negative parent-teacher conferences to the one shining star parent-teacher conference and the feedback that I'm getting from after-school programs of, wow, who is this kid? Whatever you're doing at home, keep doing it because he is just a joy and a pleasure to be around. Words I never heard. And I wasn't a joy and a pleasure to be around. I wasn't the parent that I wanted to be. And that reflected in how my kid acted at school. But now that I have done the work on myself, that I'm in constant practice of that work, that I'm compassionate towards myself when I make a mistake, and I understand it's a skill that still needs to be developed and I'm working on it. And when I can consistently show up in the practice of parenting in a way that feels good for me and my body, it's clearly reflecting in his. So I wanted to share that. And I just wanted to share, if you're just in this place of despair, I spent several years, I would say up until age 5, in a space of despair, of complete unknown of what to do, of parenting from a place of reactivity, of assuming that the only way to get my child to change behavior is if I jam the lesson, if I use reward charts, if I punish, if he experiences consequences. The only way he'll hear me is if I yell. I've lived and embodied this place for years. And all it led to was guilt, disconnection, feeling helpless, total confusion, constantly feeling like I'm not good enough, that I'm messing up, that I'm traumatizing my child and I'm going to set him up for failure. It led to so many limiting beliefs about what I could do as a parent, if I was worthy. And when I did the work and I healed parts of myself and I educated myself, it changed everything. And I can see it reflected in my kid. And I'm getting positive feedback that he's just a vibrant kid. And I think that's all we can ask for as parents, is that our kids feel safe enough to be themselves, that they're socially kind, that they're learning and engaged in school in a way that they're excited about, that they have friends. I think that's all you can really hope for as a parent. And I was shutting that down for him until I learned. We don't get a handbook. We don't get a manual. And it's really only now that we're exploring this in a way that's accessible without like a PhD or going to a therapist or going to a psychologist or going to occupational therapy or, all of these things. Tools are now so much more accessible. And it brings me so much joy when a parent connects the dots and they see that the way that they show up transforms their child. Anyways, I'm just kind of buzzing still and blown away and in awe of how the system works, of when you work it, it works. And I'm now looking at a relationship with my son that I have dreamt of, that I've begged for, and it's happening. And it feels inspiring and exciting. And if that is something that you in your gut are just like, God, I need that, that I don't know how much longer I can sustain this dynamic of just constant resistance, then please, let's connect about coaching, because it has transformed the way I show up. It has transformed my relationship with my son. It's transformed how I show up in my life. It's transformed my marriage. And to think it's because I just hit a breaking point of despair and I didn't know what else to do. And so I leaned on people who had the skills. I found people who were doing it the way I wanted to. I studied under them. I got educated. And I practiced and I practiced and I failed and I repaired and I practiced more. And the more I practiced, the more safety I felt in myself. And the more I practiced, the more I trusted my instincts. I remember a couple months into my schooling of becoming a parent coach, we were at this part of a meltdown. And my husband looked at me, he's like, you know what to do. You're in school. And in the moment I said, well, do I know what to do? I had that panic. Do I know what to do? My instinct is to punish. My instinct is to yell. My instinct is to threat. What tool are we working on this week? What am I integrating this week? And I felt so panicked that if I don't know what to do in the moment, I'm failing. And then I said, I do know what to do. I just studied this. I just need to practice what I had just studied. And there was a moment where I'm in the room reading from a part of the book and then kind of like reading it and then testing it, reading it and testing it. And I told him, I'm going back to parent school because I care about this relationship and I'm not nailing it. And you need to tell me when it feels good and when it doesn't. And you need to tell me if I'm falling back into old patterns. You need to tell me that so that I know that I can keep working on certain areas. And it's been life-changing. And when I tell my clients, tell your kids you're going back to parent school. Bring them into this. Allow them to see your efforts to connecting with them. Allow your children to be a part of your growth. If you're at this place of despair, of the cycle of guilt every night you go to bed guilty because you said you weren't going to yell and all of a sudden you're yelling. That by 7 a.m., you're like, oh my God, I have no more capacity. I don't know how to do this. Feeling helpless, feeling chaotic, feeling a constant rise of internal pressure with no understanding of how to release that except for yelling it out onto your children. Not knowing what to do besides punishments, threats, consequences, bribes, rewards. It's a cycle that can be broken. I promise you, because I've literally just experienced the payout, if you will. And it's wild. And the fact that I don't fight with my kid anymore. I can get frustrated with him, but we approach it in such a different way. Am I stressed? Absolutely. Are things chaotic? Yep. Do I lose my cool? Mm-hmm. But that was like every single moment in interaction. And now there's so much space in between that the ratio of positive, negative interactions is just so much higher, and we're building so much connection collateral. It's just inspiring, and it makes me want to keep going. And the look on his face when he hears the positive, I think he's believing it for the first time and he's trusting it. And it just feels amazing. So I invite you to connect with me because I know the change. I'm living it. It's unreal, the change. And it just feels so much better. And it's not rocket science. It's not so much education that you're going to be overwhelmed. It makes all the difference in the world, though. And why not start now? These patterns will not stop. The cycles will continue unless you decide that today is the day that you're breaking the cycle because you care enough about yourself and you care so deeply about the connection that you want forever with your child. Punishments and consequences, they're so easy. They're temporary solutions, but they make people feel shitty. And they don't ultimately teach the lesson that we want. And so why not today? Stand in what is true in the moment that, you know what? I don't have the support and the skills to do this the way I want. I don't have the skills yet. And that doesn't make me a bad parent. That doesn't make me unlovable. That doesn't mean I'm not doing a good job. That just means that I need to be aware of that and learn the skills and then practice. So where can you show up for yourself today, saying compassionately to yourself, I'm not failing. I'm not breaking my children. I'm not doing it all wrong. I just don't have the skills yet. But I'm willing to keep showing up. I'm willing to educate myself. I'm willing to keep trying. I'm willing to repair. And I desperately know in my heart, in my gut, that this cycle can end with me if I choose to. We have to choose whether or not we're willing to do the work to break the cycles. It's much easier to just keep repeating cycles. So much easier because there's no work involved. They're already ingrained. They're already default patterns. We don't need to do anything different. But if we're done, if we've just had it, we don't want to keep doing this anymore. We don't want to keep yelling. It's exhausting. Then show up differently. Let's do it. Today could be your day that you say, I'm done. I don't want to keep having the negative feedback. I don't want to keep having the fights. I don't want to keep having the battles. I know there's better out there, and I want that for myself. I invite you to book a call, connect with me, let's talk, because it is revolutionary, life-changing, and every bit of what you want in parenting is there. It's tangible. I'm literally seeing it pour out in my life, and I'm witnessing positive after positive, and I'm like, is this real? I didn't even know it could be like that. I didn't know it could be this good. It's exciting. It's empowering. And I want that for every single one of you who is where I was a few years back, just constantly in the thick of the struggle and the pain and the frustration and the hurt and the despair and the guilt and the helplessness and the hopelessness. And I'm here, and I invite you to connect because I get it. And I just know how different it can be. And I invite you to experience that difference. So thank you for being here. I hope to connect with many of you, all of you. And until then, have a wonderful day.
Thank you for listening to the ResponseABLE Parenting Podcast. If you like what you heard, please take a moment to rate, review, and subscribe. If you know someone who would benefit from this podcast, I'd be honored if you'd share this episode with them. Until next time, know that you are enough, you are capable, you've made it through all of your hardest days, and we will keep growing on this parenting journey together. This podcast was produced by Kim Kelty and myself, Becky Jennings, and edited by the Kelty Method, Branding and Podcasting.